The equality data are still work in transit, but we've got the data performance group now that meets and looks at that. It is a national problem, but we are doing some clear communications within Force for staff to understand the importance of getting that data, the equality data, when they are dealing with crimes, dealing with victims, to make sure that we've got to capture that equality data. But that scrutiny and oversight is very much it's still work in progress, but we are making some progress on that. So we had some use of force, we had some data quality issues. I'm pleased to say that those are now resolved. We've got that monthly coercive power meeting which goes ahead, and a really comprehensive performance pack to run alongside that, which looks at the real close scrutiny around the submission of use of force forms and any themes that have been picked up in there. So that meeting is ongoing. Looking at the external scrutiny panels regarding stop search, the terms of reference has been completed. It's now been signed off. We're just awaiting the neighbourhood pillar now to start those meetings, to get those meetings up and running going forward. Looking at neighbourhood abstraction, it's very much a focus now, and we're able to monitor that abstraction data much more closely, looking at it through the Engaged Communities meeting to make sure that any abstractions, they are not the norm. If demand outstrips resources, that we will use that neighbourhood as a very last resort, but we've got that monitoring process in place to understand why we've taken neighbourhood resources, but it is very rare that we try not to use neighbourhood resources there. We've got Neighbourhood Matters system up and running now, well up and running. It's now moved across to business as usual, working really well. The surveys are increasing, and that engagement with the communities and the public is really beneficial. So that's up and running. We've got the neighbourhood policing programme training starting to be rolled out, and problem solving is one of the key modules within that training. So that's up and running and ongoing. Said about the attendance times, which is really positive, and we're still doing some work on that. We do continually monitor it, but at the moment we're not seeing a real beneficial progress, looking at the schedule calls now that we've got that, and consistency across emergency and priority as well. Looking at the report of risks to harm and children, we've got the new DARA process introduced now, the new risk assessment tool. So that we have that in December for us, and looking at how we improve, looking at that managing risk within domestic abuse incidents, and that's good. The compliance with that is monitored through the crime pillar. And we're looking at a new digital solution around the submission of public protection notices. The work is still ongoing in this area to get that improvement. We're messaging out to our officers and getting them to understand around the importance of the public protection notices, but not only working within Force, but working with our partners as well, with social services, to make sure those public protection notices are of a good quality, etc. Looking at our investigation, quality of investigations, there's a whole raft of work ongoing within Force around this. We've got the quality of investigation, the victim care and change programme. We've got the detective superintendent leading that, and they've got 6 guiding principles within that, which is victim care, risk management, investigation standards, suspect management, supervisory ownership, and performance and compliance. So there's a raft of KPIs within there that we are looking at across the Force. There's the investigation standards meeting that monitors the quality of those investigations, and that reports into the ACC's operational effectiveness board. There's still a lot of focus on this. We are doing a lot of work around the investigation timeliness, and I'll come into that when I do the performance report. What we will see, because we've had such a surge within the crime management unit of clearing tasks, we will start to see an uprise in some of those timeliness, the length of timeliness for a short period, but it will be for the benefit of getting quality of the investigations eventually over the next couple of months back on track. We've already seen, although we've seen a little bit of a spike in the timeliness of investigations, we are starting to see go back down in the right direction. But I think the focus is very much on the quality now of the investigations and giving that service to the public as well as victims. We're developing the quality service review that's up and running with a dip sampling tool for inspectors. And within that, there'll be core questions set to better understand the investigative quality as well. So all these factions come together to make sure that progress, that's one of the areas that we do need to really improve on. It was one of our areas for improvement there, is that quality investigations, and a really positive story around the domestic violence disclosure scheme. We have now no out of compliance. We are compliant on a daily basis. It will be very rare that we go about single figures now, and that will be the rationale and reasoning behind that. But pleased to say we've had the area for improvement signed off in that, because that's a massive turnaround that the team have looked at processes, how we are dealing with giving those messages out to victims as well. So that's a really good news story. Looking at the preventative orders, I'm pleased to say that we've got 2 preventative orders in transit. They are working through the system with the Joint Legal Services. There's some training inputs have been delivered through January to our staff to help navigate through those preventative orders and to make sure that we use them where appropriate. So that is starting to show progress as well. In relation to our trained and skilled staff, we've got the vulnerability training steering group to make sure that we've got the right people with the right skills in the right places, dealing with complex crimes, etc. We've now got induction training programs for staff moving into safeguarding hubs, which we didn't have previously. It's given that foresight and the training that they need to go into the safeguarding hubs to make sure we've got the right people in the right places. And that works the same exactly for people going into the public protection units. Now they have that induction of going into those really crucial and complex departments there. In relation to our sickness, we've got the sickness improvement plan now ongoing. We've got measures in place. We've got a silver meeting up and running now on a monthly basis. We monitor sickness figures on a daily basis, and we are starting to see some green shoots around some of the work that's going on in the background, working with our senior leaders and right down through the ranks around understanding the triggers, understanding the preventative work that we're doing around sickness. Still a lot of work to do there, but it is starting to show some improvement there around the structure we've got wrapped around that. Looking at the employee opinion survey, that was very, very positive, going in the right direction. We started to see some real green shoots in a lot of the areas that have come in. We had better compliance and people were more willing to use the employee opinion survey. And what was pleasing that we saw PCSOs really buying into the process this year, which has fed into the Chief Constables and road shows. So really positive there. Each area now will have a 3-point plan to bring into the HR arena now, so that they give us an overview of what's being done in their area to address some of the questions that are being raised or areas that of concern have been raised by staff. So looking at the next steps, I'm continuing to host the Force Improvement Board, where we have what's called a spotlight report now for each of the areas of improvement, focusing on mainly the ones that the highlight ones that we need to do the investigation standards, protecting vulnerable, and the leadership. So we have a monthly spotlight report that comes, and the lead for the area presents a risks, where we are and what mitigation is in place and what work is being progressed there. So those are working really well. And then around financial considerations, the Service Improvement Board now asks that everybody looks at, if they are presenting a case to the board around growth, or there's a financial implication, that they look around the value for money profiles, and if there's anything in force that we can redirect any resources that perhaps could offset some financial. So that is more or less business as usual now, that individuals and staff know that before bringing the paper there, that has to be done. And I think that is probably a very quick answer to the report.
Thank you very much for that, and it's good to hear that so many of those actions have been signed off. So that's really good progress in relation to that. And it would be completely remiss of me not to recognise within this the really positive feedback in terms of the firearms work that's been ongoing. We know a huge amount of effort has gone into that here in Gwent. It's an excellent, well, that's fine, just really, we're at the forefront really of some of the work here. So I'm really pleased. And I do hope that whatever happens in future in terms of the centralisation of functions, that lessons can be learned from the excellent work that has been ongoing here in Gwent. So really pleased to hear that. I do want to pick up on a couple of issues, if I may, in relation to this report. I'd like to just explore some further information with you in relation to sickness levels. So sickness levels are something that comes up in the performance report as well. And I know this is something that the public that I represent are interested in, and certainly something the Police and Warrant Panel members are interested in as well. So just in relation to that, we see in the performance report that we'll be discussing as the next item that actually those rates are still on the increase. And you've given us an assurance that a plan is underway, and so my questions in relation to that are you starting to see, what are you starting to see in relation to this? Because you've got a plan in place, you're undertaking some actions, but when I look at the data, I can see that those rates are still increasing. So is it that the plan is yet to take effect? And when you're looking at this and you're implementing your plan, are you confident in that the balance between overall oversight of this and also the need to support well-being, that balance is right as well?
Yeah, with the new structure that's in place, yes, I'm confident. There's still work to do, and I think what we are focusing on is early intervention now. Our long-term sick is one of the areas of our concern, and it's getting to make sure that supervisors understand what the triggers are, what those early intervention methods we can use before if they're on medium term or short to medium term, don't tip into the long term. Because there's nothing worse than leaving people, hanging on a thread if they're on not having that support from. So we've got a new toolkit, a supervisor's code toolkit for supervisors to understand those triggers as well, and understand what interventions we can put in place, what well-being we can put in place for staff. What I will say as well, though, what we probably didn't use and we are starting to look at now is the unsatisfactory performance as well.
Yeah.
Because there are two factions really. Yes, we need to look after the welfare, but do we need to look at unsatisfactory performance measures as well, putting those in place? So I think the meetings have been up and running for a few months now. We are starting to see green shoots there. Still a bit of work to do, but I think Victor, do you want to add anything?
I tend to see on the board This is mental health. So our focus thus far has been on long-term sickness and really complex cases, because often that's where there is a lag in terms of the resolution for the individual and the organisation. The policy changes have really helped us, and to answer your one question, within the policy, there is built opportunities for reasonable adjustments. So if we need to give that balance to a particular individual because of their unique set of circumstances, then the policy allows us to do that with reasonable adjustments. And I get the update on all of the individual cases, and I am satisfied that that is applied where it is appropriate. And actually, where we need to toe the line in terms of UPP being more appropriate, we do so. So what we're seeing is there has been a slight downward trend in terms of overall numbers. Having looked at it this morning, because I look at it every day. But what we're seeing is the profile is different now. So we're having more people drop from long term down to medium and short term. So I am changing it slightly, the scope of the Silver meeting, to put the focus on inclusive of long term and complex, the medium term 20 to 27 days. Because what I want to do is to prevent people becoming a long-term absence with whatever supporting measures in place there. What we are seeing is we have had a slight increase in people resigning. We think this is not to them, and sometimes that's the right outcome for individuals. We're seeing an increase in people returning on phased opportunities, but we are putting in different working opportunities for them where there before, and we are seeing an increased usage of the stages. So taking someone through the relevant stages to support that sector. So I think there is a much wider piece of work for us to do, because this is cultural. People need to be comfortable that this process moves on speedily, because I think that's been our Achilles heel historically. But I am comfortable that the government should do that for us, and I'm happy to report through on the Silver meetings if it's helpful.
So, Commissioner, I just add that I'm hugely grateful to what Vicky just articulated, because I think the government's scrutiny, we haven't had that at a Silver board level previously, so it's fantastic that we got that in place. I totally just want to build on the last point that Vicky said there about the cultural aspect. We have invested as an organisation in occupational health, as you know. I've put that as a forefront for people and their welfare. I think you'll see from what was our force direction forum and what the Chief Constable's roadshows I'm about to roll out, it really strongly links into quality of care, because what we want to do is get upstream in relation to sickness itself. There's a lot of underlying aspects that we need to improve on. We need our supervisors to have one-to-ones. We need them to have meaningful PDR conversations. We need departmental heads to have focus groups, which are already underway in across the board. So we can have those early interactions and engagements over things which are possibly being drivers longer term, if unaddressed, for people considering sickness as an option, or getting to a point where they're stressed over things, where they genuinely are feeling too anxious to be in work. So I think it's a combination of our scrutiny, government's enhanced use of UPP and clarity and communication, leadership training, plus an actual step back of this needs to be day-to-day business, so that we're anticipating with intrusive supervision how we can avoid sickness becoming a principle in the first place. That's not an overnight fix, but some of the aspects that Vicky's put into place are already showing good pointers, but I think that's the long-term game.
It's really positive to hear that. And how are you engaging with the staff networks and the representative bodies, trade unions, federation, chief superintendents association, to support this as well? How are you linking with those networks?
Yeah. So if I talk quite tactically, so beneath my Silver group, there are inner meetings, namely functioning meetings. And I have to say, in terms of both the Federation and Unison, they're very supportive both of their members but also of leaders trying to work through the process. And sometimes that support will be an offer of what reasonable adjustments can be considered, because that is right. There should be a team effort in terms of how we best support people and how we do right by the organisation. But they are absolutely key through those tactical forums, and then up to me at the Silver level, and we get an awful lot of support, guidance and feedback, and sometimes that is for us to learn from, and sometimes it helps us move forward.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to pick up on another point, which I think would really lead to an action stemming from this. So in terms of investigations and victims care, you've told us this is something that we've discussed here a number of times around the timeliness of investigations, and you've highlighted some of the changes that have been made and plans that are in place and processes now to help that. As an action from this meeting, can you please arrange for a detailed briefing for the OPCC leadership team in relation to that? It's something that keeps coming up here. Where we don't really have the opportunity to better understand that detail. So if you could take that as an action. And
it's actually helpful because, and the conversation that we have at Plymouth School is actually some of the changes that we need to make to the organisation as a result of the neighbourhood policing guarantee has a knock-on impact on our staffing makeup, which has a knock-on impact on training, which has a knock-on impact on demand. So some of the elements that I own, where there's been an increase in demand, is a direct consequence. And some of that I know I'm just going to have to absorb for a period of time to allow the longer term goal to be achieved. So actually to share some of that I think would be useful for everybody. So that's not a problem.
That's great. Thank you for that. That's really helpful. Anybody else got any questions in relation to this? Thank you very much. That was very helpful, very informative. And once again, it's just so positive to get that really good feedback. Certainly for the citizens that I represent, it's really good to get the assurance that the force is travelling in the right direction in relation to this. So well done, everybody. We move on then to item 3B now, which is the organisational performance report against the Police and Crime Plan priorities. This is the Q3 report. So back over to you, Deputy Chief Principal. And can I just say how pleasing it is to see the performance information organised in relation to the priorities of the plan. Really helpful in terms of going through it. So thank you.
I'd be pleased to know I'm looking at 58 pages, Commissioner. I've summarised under your So looking at the first priority, preventive crime in ASB, we are looking at the perception survey to start with. We are starting to see subtle positive changes there. The rolling through 12 months, we've got 42%, which is a slight improvement, not where we want to be, but it is starting to show a slight improvement there. We are looking at an upward trend there. The overall confidence in police in the area is 62%. Again, not where we want to be. We want to be better than that. But what I will say, that upward trend, we've got the neighbourhood matters now. So I'm hoping that when we get the future data in with this, that impact will start to show on those perception surveys as well. It's still, still quite new with the neighbourhood matters, but I think that impact will start to show through those perception surveys going forward. ASB, really good picture here, is showing a significant reduction with 25% down on the previous quarter. We've got tasking and problem profiles used now. So they determine where our CAT team are deployed, community action team are deployed. We've got hotspot patrols across the force area, again targeted with tasking and where that demand requests. Picking up on of the Halloween and the bonfire night, ASB, which is a real area for those two dates. We normally see some high numbers there. We had a reduction of 42%, which is superb. It shows that our work that the neighbourhood teams and the right across the force is working. So the Safer Streets campaign now is focusing on ASB, street crime and retail, working with the community safety partnerships as well, which I think is to make sure that partnership working is in transit, and that data sharing as well, because I think that's absolutely crucial that we get that. Very grateful for the City Safe investment that yourself, Commissioner, gave for that additional £50,000 for the 5 CSPs to support this as well. We've got, I mentioned neighbourhood matters, but that's now business as usual. The surveys are, all the training is completed, and the surveys that we are seeing and the feedback on that is increasing. We've got Safer Schools engagement, which is much improved. It's a positive increase from where we were for Q3. Actually, in Q3, we've seen an increase of additional 1,250 engagements, which is absolutely superb. and looking into topics that they deliver there. That includes ASB, knife crime, hate crime and online crime, which is a real high demand because the online crime is particularly in that age group. So I think that's absolutely crucial that we deliver that. So just picking up on the highlights there. Looking at number 2, making our communities safer. Response times have already given you that positive compliance there, the compliance rate, and actually the answer times are superb there. We've got under 2 to 3 minutes for one-on-one calls. We keep that under attrition to under 10%. It's very often in single figures there, and again with the 999 calls, the answer 95% and above on a routine. This is under 5 seconds there, so that's really positive. We've seen a reduction in recorded knife crime offences. In fact, it's 21% lower than the last quarter and 19% lower than the same quarter last year. So we are seeing a downward trend. I think this could be attributed to some of the stop search proactive tactics that we are now using. The SOC partnership meetings are crucial. With knife crime there is a focus on the knife crime there. We've got a knife crime problem profile up and running now, and looking at the homicide and serious violence meeting, there's a standing agenda item there scrutinising knife crime in each local authority area and tasking where necessary. We took part in OPSEPTA. The prevention, enforcement and education, I think are the cons that we did around that area, I think was most beneficial. There's some college inputs at School for Fearless around knife crime, and the ACC has now commissioned a piece of work around a deep dive, because even though our knife crime recorded offences are down, the last 3 homicides that we've had have been knife related. So the ACC has commissioned a piece of work there to look at the whys around that and what we need to put in place. But we've also got that data sharing now with the the health authority, so they report on injuries, knife-related injuries to us, so we can assimilate that and we're working into our knife crime plans as well. So and then just looking at dangerous dogs, we've still a high demand for force within that area, but what I will say is the management around this has vastly improved. We've now got real strong strategic oversight and accountability and an escalation process as well. Really conscious that JLS have now given us quite significant support in this area, whether we do the civil route or the criminal route, which allows investigations to progress much faster. That's working really well. The number held in kennels now is vastly reduced. We're now down to 24, when we were looking nearer towards 100 at one point.
Yeah, at least 70 or
Yeah, I managed to update along this week, so we've had results down to 16 this week, so 53.
And we've got the local policing teams, they continue to provide that engagement and education as well with communities about responsible management. So that's still an area of demand, but improving picture there.
But demand doesn't drop, is it?
No.
For that.
It's just the management scrutiny around it is much better, much tighter. Do you want me to carry on right through all?
Well, I just on the dogs particularly. For the purposes of this public meeting, I just want to emphasise that we're talking about this and we're talking about improvements. But we talked about the numbers that have been held in kennels previously. There is a significant cost to this to the public purse, isn't it? So that those citizens that I represent, that are paying the precept here in Gwent, and all of us actually as taxpayers through central government taxation as well, that cost is borne by all of us, and it's an increasing cost, and it's something that people in communities, in their neighbourhoods, do need to be mindful of, because they're paying for it, and if they have got concerns, then certainly the police are happy to hear that, if they've got concerns about what is happening in their own neighbourhoods. But it is a problem, but it costs everybody, and it's not just the financial cost, is it? Because we've had some significant tragedies here in Gwent because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, I think the piece for us is making sure we were really content with our processes to streamline that as much as possible to make sure that we will be efficient and effective in terms of our utilisation of the kennels. Ryan Francis has done a really good piece of work with JLS's support to look at what opportunities have we got to streamline that. I now feel that we are in a comfortable position that we are maximising those efficiencies. But as you say, when the legislation came in, there wasn't the recognition of the cost implication for forces. So even if we are maximising the opportunities, there is still an impact for the public. And I cannot take that away completely because we do need to respond to threat conflicts.
Yeah, and that's the point I was going to reinforce, because I get what you're getting at there, Commissioner, in relation to the fact that, yeah, there is a financial cost, but our stance has always been to positively promote people reporting dogs that they're concerned about in their community, because as we know,
Absolutely.
communities don't recover from tragic incidents like the Bradley Impulse.
Absolutely.
But I will say there is absolutely no indication at all that we will ever receive a financial piece of recognition like we received as a one-off payment for this additional burden.
And that's why I think it's important for the public to understand that if they've got a concern, they should report it, because the cost of whatever happens will be met by them indirectly. They may not recognise that, but as citizens, we bear the cost of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I've got a few questions, but if you just want to go on.
Looking at the protecting the vulnerable then, and pick up on VAUG. So we've seen a reduction in reported offences, down to 12%, and 3.8% reduction from last year. We've also seen a slight reduction in the solve rate. The numbers are down. It is slight, but no change from solve rate from last year. We've got really good Bowdr SB board attendance. We just had the strategy completed, has just been signed off, and we will have a delivery plan sat behind that. One of the main focuses is perpetrators and repeat perpetrators. That's very much a focus in the area. And I think that's working. We've got the national plan as well. What I did ask for in the meeting is, with our strategies and the delivery plans, is making sure that we avoid duplication, because a lot of these action plans and delivery plans overlap, but making sure that we are focused on victims, perpetrators and pre-perpetrators as well. Looking at rape, demands incrementally increasing, but we have seen a slight reduction from the previous quarter and last year. Just to give you some context, there's just under 200 rapes reported per quarter, which is a huge demand for the force. A high percentage of those are non-recent, which is encouraging in a way, because people are more likely to come or willing to come forward and report historic, but those come with their complexities and usually in increasing the investigations as well.
How do they impact on solve rate?
They are sometimes very difficult to get from the court.
And they do impact on the investigation timeliness as well, because victims often need an additional layer of enhanced support because of the trauma that they've gone through, and obviously it's been lived trauma for a long time, and that needs to come as the priority of how long the investigation is taking. So when we drop out the numbers, we see that those type of offences are ones that take longer, significantly longer.
And they come with the complexities when they get to court as well. But sometimes the journey for the victim isn't getting that outcome of court, it's getting to court, and getting their story there. What I will say is our attrition rate for victims is really, really low, probably one of the best. I think that's down to the survivor engagement work that we've got, and the rape investigation team. We've got a dedicated team of victims on board throughout the engagement, even if those investigations are lengthy. So we've got demand modelling has just been undertaken for the rape investigation team. We know that we need more staff in there, and that's what the demand modelling has shown. We're just working through that now to increase the uplift of staff within there to meet demand. We will be aware, Commissioner, that the government direction now is for all forces to have a dedicated rape investigation team, which we are already on the front foot. We just need to make sure that we've got resources in there to meet the demand that's coming through the door. That's already work ongoing with that. I think we've got to send our plans back to government at the end of this month, but we are ahead of the game, I would say, with our investigation team already up and running. Do you want me to carry on? Yeah. So looking at 4, putting victims first. So we've already discussed around investigation timeliness, and we have seen an increase in reported the number for this quarter. It's gone up 8 days, and it's gone up 11 days compared to last year. But what I will say is it's now dropped back down a little bit. I've just had a look at what our current one is, starting to drop down a bit. Mentioned the investigation quality standards, scrutiny and oversight there. The crime management unit have had an influx of staff now. We've got the trained staff up and running. We did have a backlog in there of 10,000 tasks. I'm really pleased to say now that's down well below 6,000 in a really short period of time. So that will have an impact on the investigation timeliness, as I've said earlier on, for a short period initially, but positive progress within those. We'll start to see those numbers drop and the scrutiny we've got around it. I've said about the rape increase. We've got complexity with rape investigations. Those do tend to push our investigation timelines up because of the complexity and the time it takes to both work through those. But what we are seeing is sexual offences and robbery. We're starting to see a decrease there, which is positive. DBDS, as I've mentioned, around the daily monitor and scrutiny, and we're very compliant with that now. And the AFI is closed, which we've got that. Survivor engagement coordinator stakeholder group, which is very positive, and I know you're aware they met the Safeguarding Minister, Jess Phillips, who was very complimentary, I think, of the questions and the structure that we've got in force. And we've just making sure that we've got delivery of consistent victims code of practice metrics with the head of victim service there. Looking at reducing reoffending, we're starting to see a reduction in numbers of recording offenders, both from last quarter and last year. We've got a real good scrutiny and governance around this now right across the force. It's part of performance packs that are held right across the force. We've seen a steady reduction in numbers of repeat offenders over the last quarters, which is positive. We've also got a gold group up and running now, and scrutiny around the focus of outstanding offenders as well. The ACC has got that up and running. That's across the force. Understanding our numbers, prioritising enforcement, and making sure we do that positive, proactive approach there. So that work is it's new, it's emerging, but it is starting to give us that holistic picture of where we are with our outstanding offenders.
Sorry, so just mention that. I think the important thing to notice with this one as well, is that number is likely to increase. So I'm expecting at a point in time you're going to see a sharp incline, and the question will be why. But it's because of this work that we are doing, because we are trying to turn around the crime allocation policy in relation to how quickly we are able to make sure we respond to somebody being identified as a suspect. So for me, a positive incline is going to be a positive result, because that's what I want to happen. So in the next couple of months, you should see that in the numbers.
Okay, and then looking at young offenders and first-time entrants, the number of under 18 offenders reducing is the lowest figure we've seen within 3 years. So that's really, really positive. Very slight increase this quarter of first-time entrants, but significant reduction from this time last year, 90% actually. The focus now is on diversion to restorative processes, and then reducing that further reoffending by children and young people. Force, we are leading the Welsh forces in this work and youth justice services. We've taken child-centric procedures and approach and looking at out-of-court resolution. There's a good governance in place and they've got accountability to the Wales Youth Justice Advisory Panel and the Criminal Justice Board. So those making sure that the work that's ongoing with young people and children coming into custody is scrutinised. And what we are seeing is an emerging issue is the legislation changes to the independent sentence review. That is likely to give us increased demand right across the communities. And managing people in the communities is going to bring quite a bit of demand there. But we're working with probation, police and probation are working very closely together because our IOM cohort is likely to increase incrementally from the sentencing review. So that is something that we are. It's a national issue, but we need to focus on how we manage that demand out in the communities.
Just on that point, the sentencing review is something that I could talk about in length. But just on that point, when the government announced these changes, I think they mentioned a figure of around about £74 million being invested in probation to help them deal with the changes. Can you just expand on the level of resource, if any, that is coming into policing to help support these changes?
Very little. And I think what we are seeing is that probation were leaning on policing more to pick up some of that demand. We've had to push back because we manage a significant number of offenders in the community, and it has to be a joint effort for us, our probation, to manage those. So.
Sorry, the estimation around the demand shifted interesting as well, because the estimations are anywhere between 0% and 49.5%, and that's a huge difference. So we are keeping a really close eye on it. We monitor this to our model board, we keep an eye on the big debt, but that's a huge discrepancy of difference, which causes me quite a lot of concern in relation to what this is going to look like going forward.
Absolutely. Eleni, could you?
Yeah, I just wanted to assure you, Commissioner, that it was raised at the Criminal Justice Board yesterday, in particular by the CPS, in particular, and probation. These changes are imminent,
yes.
And in particular in relation to the implications in terms of short-term sentences and bail, and those will have direct implications for policing colleagues, but equally it will have, I think it probably is an opportunity for us all to consider your collective, Commissioner and Chief Constable's, priority on trust and confidence, and how the changes to sentencing will impact on the public's understanding in relation to trust and confidence.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I don't know, Darren or Matt, would you like to remind us, for the purposes of this public meeting, what the national estimate is to policing is?
£3 million. Yeah, so we're heading across England and Wales. The estimate is 100 million for 2026-27 is the knock-on impact within policing in terms of potential cost. A further 200 million then for 2027 and 28. As Darren says, our share could be estimated at 1% of that, which is our funding share. Potential £3 million risk for us.
So,
Just to confirm, you there's no resourcing or financial considerations made for it at all.
absolutely. So I think it's really important for the purposes of this public meeting to clarify that the unintended consequence of changes that have been made to the Ministry of Justice will have an impact on policing, and there is no additional resource coming into policing to deal with that, and we estimate the cost for the grant
£3 million.
to be £3 million, and we have no additional resource to fund that. So, as well as the impact on public, the experience that public will have in our communities and concerns that they may have, now, hopefully, by raising awareness and people understanding that there are plans in place for Grant Police to deal with this and to work with partners and dealing with this, we can give that assurance to our communities around community safety and activities within our communities. Nonetheless, it is important to emphasise collectively, in terms of policing, there is an additional cost for it and no resource on the horizon to support this. I think it's really important in public meeting to emphasise this, so we've got a record of it.
What I will say is we've recently restructured our offender services resources and department to make sure that we are ready for business, basically, and got those resources in place, but it's a challenge.
And it's good to hear that our criminal justice partners are all also highlighting potential risks around this for us as well. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you for that.
That's it. That's Mrs. Dr.
Well, just to go back to my first point then, I do really like the way the information is organised. It makes it really easy to see how performance is developing against those priorities. So I'm really happy. And if you can feed that back to the team that supports it, I'd be really pleased with that. I did want to ask a few questions. And first of all, I just wanted to highlight something that comes up at so many meetings that I attend, that I know the Chief Constable attends, when we're out meeting with the public, whether we're in a public meeting or we're doing our public accountability forum, where we've been collecting the views that with our residents, or if we're at a town council, community council, with you know, across all of these different arenas, the one thing that people do like to raise, because it is an issue that for many people affects their lives, is antisocial behaviour. So it's really pleasing to see the really positive work and positive outcomes coming from that. And also to hear, really, you mentioned the basis on which the location prioritisation of the CAPTs is made. You know, it's evidence-based. It's looking at where that support is really needed. And I think it's important also, again, because it's a public meeting, to really emphasise the really wise use, in my view, of the investment through the Neighbourhood Policing Guarantee to support this work here in Gwent. Yeah. So really pleased with that, and I think we should actually celebrate the work that the teams have done. And also, I'd like to share with you, as colleagues, the really positive feedback that's coming through from communities in relation to this. It's a really good piece of work, and it is having that positive impact on people's lives in our communities, and hopefully we'll make that contribution to increasing trust and confidence.
Thank you, Commissioner. So very grateful for that. And just for you to know, and hopefully it might help those people who are raising their comments, we're planning on taking this a step further. So as you know, we do a lot of work in relation to frequency and relevancy of people who commit criminal offences, and actually sometimes ASP can very much be a pathway for that escalation of offence type. So we've refined our process for offenders. We are very much going to apply the same learning to ASP, and Jason's continuing a piece of work for us with that will then feed into tasking, because we, as you say, we've seen some progress, but we think we can take it a step further. So hopefully over the next coming months, the community will see that impact as well.
And I've got to say, in relation to both the summer and the winter campaigns, we've seen some really positive results there. And actually, I think certainly from our perspective as OPCC, what we've seen is that actually a relatively small investment to support the teams and communities goes a long way, has a huge impact. So I'm really pleased with that, and certainly very pleased with the way that Chief Superintendent White has led on that as well. So really pleased with that. I would like to move on, if I may, to another few items. And let me say, with things the public really care about at the moment, and that is that continued performance around 999 and 101. That is excellent. And what we're starting to see with the trends there is that the changes that you've made in terms of processes and the way that those calls are managed is really having an impact. And again, positive feedback from our citizens in our communities in relation to that, and from our colleagues on the police and crime panel. And it's always good to have their positive feedback. So I move on then to a couple of points that I wanted to raise really. I do want to come back to the point about rape and solved rates, because I know that our citizens have concerns around that. And when we look at the data shows us, the figure shows us a relatively low figure in relation to a solved rate. What assurances can you provide around that? Because that is something I think that people raise with me, but also going forward into International Women's Day, you know, we're focused at this time of year, but we've always got focus on those sorts of issues. But I do think it's very, very contemporary to try and just look a little bit more closely to that and seek greater assurance in relation to that. Because if I remember the public looking at the data, I may think that those solved rates are low.
Yeah. Look, I was on the fullness document we've got here, our solved rate is 10.7%, which is high. If you look across, it doesn't sound high. If you look across the country, we are bucking the trend. We are well up there with in the top number of forces with that. It's a 3.7 increase on last year. We did see a dip over the last 18 months, but our solved rate did drop. And it was really disappointing because the work that was put in with the team was really significant. But with those positive outcomes are now starting to show. I think we're, compared to the other 4 Welsh forces as well, we're well up there. We're either first or second. We did drop down in the last 18 months, as I said, but we are now starting to be back up there. So our solved rate, albeit it does sound low, it is bucking the trend with the national average. And I think that the work that they're doing with the judiciary around the conviction rate is still ongoing, because we get the solved rate, we get cases to court really well. But what we're not seeing that translate into is the conviction rates at the end. Mm-hmm. Like I said earlier, that journey isn't always what victims are looking for. It's that, you know, that the fact that they've been believed and they've got their case to court. But that's something that's worked ongoing, and I think the increase within the resources within the team are going to see even better results in there. Because that increased demand that we're going in there, that's definitely positive.
Thank you for that clarification. And for the purposes of this public meeting, because I know many people may choose to do this in their own time and just to satisfy themselves that scrutiny is being undertaken effectively. For the purposes of this public meeting, can you just clarify what the definition of solved?
Yeah, so that's if we get an investigation that comes in through the door, victim reports, the team do the investigation, we then go to the Crown Prosecution Service for a decision on that, and that positive charge that we get allows us to have that solved rate. So that's simplified. And then obviously the case progresses through the judicial system, through the criminal justice system then, and the conviction outcome at the end is a different metric that we measure, but it's getting that good work that the investigation team do with a victim, with an investigation, and a positive result and a positive charge at the end of that process.
Just I think it's a really important point. In particular with this area, as you are very aware, we had an outstanding grading when it came to crime data integrity, and though it was a large contributor of our overall performance in relation to that area, we were specifically praised on the way that we dealt with rape and sexual offences with a prompt and accurate crime recording. We were nearly 97% in relation to those specific offences, which I think was a big contributor towards getting that outstanding grading, really. And I think that aspect of things is really reassuring for me, in the fact that if you get that right at the first point of contact, you have more of an opportunity to get a positive outcome at the end of it, really.
Yeah, and I think just listening to the discussion on this, I think it should be clear for us and for any citizens who may be looking at this recording, that they can take assurance from the work that goes on, but it's also important to recognise there are other partner organisations within this process that can also have an impact on that solve rate figure. So it's not necessarily straightforward, and there are other partners involved as well. And I just think if we can all help the public to better understand that, you know, and that will help people better understand that the actual solved rate figure is a good figure.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's really, really helpful. I wanted to just pick up on missing children. And I know this is something that's been discussed at the safeguarding board. I just wanted to ask the Chief Officer team really about the level of assurance and confidence you've got with the processes and the resources that are in place to manage this. And are your teams treating all missing children as high risk in a trauma-informed way?
Yeah. So in relation to children, so our policy is actually children can be high risk or medium risk. They can never be low risk. That goes against our policy, and we are comfortable with the guidance that's in place for them to be reviewed. The timelines will obviously shorten for a review for a child because the risk to them is much more heightened than it is to an adult by the very nature that they are vulnerable because they are a child. We're very happy in terms of the governance around exploitation teams and PPU teams coming together as a collective unit. And I'm very content with the changes that we've made to the response and around that ownership, because we have now a rotated Mr. Sergeant, a rotated inspector to drive that consistency. I do have concerns around missing children, and there'll be some other items that are raised at tomorrow's forum that Michelle is going to highlight for us, because a lot of our missing children are out of county, coming into Gwent, and I have concerns around what the information sharing looks like in order to allow us to, and local authority in fairness, to be able to best protect those individuals. I am concerned there's a gap. Michelle and I, by chance, have had some conversations since Friday because the concerns we saw at our board, and then a case study which I won't go into because I'm conscious that this is a little bit forum, but will be shared tomorrow. So internally, I am much more satisfied with our governance. There is an information sharing gap, and there does need to be some work done to fill that on our behalf and for our partners.
Okay, thank you for that. And it would be good to get an update on the progress really in terms of your concerns in relation to that as we move forwards. Has anybody else got any further questions?
Can I just ask about burglary? Seems to have jumped up quite significantly this quarter. And have you got any insights into why that may have happened, or the impact that might have had on your resourcing?
What I will say, Sam, is that all the investigations residential are allocated to CID, from the investigation department. With that oversight there, yes, we have seen a drop in the solve rate. We did see quite an incremental rise when we put new processes in place. So we've got a first responder burglary app on the officer's phone, so they're able to access those for those golden hour inquiries to make sure that those are done immediately. Forensic opportunities, etc., CCTV, passive data, whatever they can. We are seeing what we did see was a rise in the Caerphilly and Torfaen area. Those were specific offenders that were targeted by the local teams and apprehended and arrested and dealt with. So we will see spikes in particular areas when we have a series, but those two particular areas are Caerphilly and Torfaen. We saw a rise there, but they were dealt with. So we will see those spikes. Unfortunately, but I think that goes back to the managing the offenders as well. The work that the ACC is doing to make sure that we're getting those individuals identified and dealt with straight away. Monmouthshire is probably a different area because we do tend to get travelling offenders through there simply because of the nature of the geography there. But just to reassure you, those measures are in place. The CID have got that oversight, and it is very much a focus of the work that the LPAs do with the tasking, etc.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the community action team actually were the ones who apprehended the serial offender and to avoid a proactive operation, which is great to see.
I just wanted to come back, really good to hear about the publication of or the approval of the new Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, and also in your oversight, the need to really focus on perpetrator work. And I just wonder how, because obviously the new UK strategy has a series of new requirements on policing, and just wondered how you feel currently perpetrator support is covered in WEDGE, and whether that's an area we need to perhaps prioritise going forward.
Yeah, it definitely is an area that we need to have improvement on. I don't think we've got that sufficient coverage or support for perpetrator management with not within policing. It's that external organisations, partnership work, to have those measures in place to deal with offenders. So I think there's definitely more work that needs to be put into. I don't know if there's something.
There is, and just by chance, so we've recognised, because of a few of the strategies that we've signed off recently, that our governance structure, which was signed off a year ago now, probably needs to be amended ever so slightly to meet the needs of our organisation going forward. I'll do a light touch if that's okay, because I think I've got the chief officer team to sign up. We had the meeting yesterday afternoon, and part of that is around how we break out some of the organ vulnerability to give a specific focus on the vulnerable delivery plan, some of the work you're talking about, like focus public spaces, and to deliver that more focused commitment and resolution to it. So we're just making these amendments in terms of governance, and then we will share it as appropriate. That's okay.
And I think it's probably an area that we could take a look at collectively.
Yes. Thank you. Anyone else got any further queries?
The only last thing I wanted to say, and the DCC is aware that I had feedback, Commissioner, from the Youth Justice Board recently about a positive engagement that they've had in the youth offending service in Monmouthshire and Torvine, and really complimentary about the child-centred focus of the work with Web Police. I just wanted to provide that feedback.
Yeah, forgot to put that.
Excellent, that's great, thank you. Really positive there. Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you very much for that. Should we move on then to the to Principal's delivery plan?
Thanks, Commissioner. So obviously you're aware of the citing of the paper already. Don't propose to go through it all in detail, because you'll see from the format that we've undertaken in submission, it is a familiar theme in relation to meeting your crime justice plan. I'd say in relation to the plan in general, as it says, it's 2025 to 2029 plan. So it is a 5-year plan. What I think is encouraging to say is to report on the first year, and then what we're intending on focusing on this year as part of that 5-year plan. So you're aware that recently held the leadership teams across the Force Direction Forum, where I was able to outline what the achievements of the force have been had over the last year, the challenges I foresee on the horizon, and the focus of priorities that I'd like all of our teams to unite on tackling in the year forward. I've held the first of a series of 7 Chief Constables roadshows that are going to be imminently delivered across to all our officers and staff to reinforce those points. What I'd say is, I know it's been said in much of the DEPS updates, we're seeing green shoots in relation to improving trust and confidence, which I think is wrapping back to our mission statement. I'm greatly encouraged by the fact that we are seeing that increase in relation to people believing that they can trust went police. It's only a movement of 1.3% by comparison to last year, but that's a huge amount in the scheme of things. And for me, there's always going to be a lag in relation to improved performance and improved perception. What we're already seeing is perception data moving in the right direction as well. The example being the number of people that actually think we get to emergency response calls in promptly and effectively is up to 68% from 62%, which is a leap of 6%, but it's still nowhere near what we actually deliver. We're consistently well over 80%, and the same in relation to priority calls, actually hitting 87%, where people perception is more like the high 60s. But I'm encouraged by the fact that people are seeing that improvement, even though it's not at the same level. And I think over that 5-year delivery, what I believe is that will catch up over time by our continued and consistent delivery in those key metrics. So breaking it down in relation to the last year and things that we contributed into your 5 thematics, I'm not going to repeat a lot of the things that the DEF has already said, but I just will reinforce a few points in certain areas. So particularly to preventing crime and antisocial behaviour, you know that we're both aligned in relation to that neighbourhood strong visibility focus, meeting complex crimes and online crimes, but never at the expense of visible policing, meeting our community's needs. Our community action team, it's already been touched on about the neighbourhood policing guarantee and the focusing of additional 22 officers posts and the PCSO guarantees that we've given in relation to visible PCSOs across the force and on wards. Our community action team have been really effective in the areas that they've been operating so far. I know you're more than aware of the positive feedback that we've received on them. They've had over 170 arrests, 160 vehicle seizures, targeting issues that are specifically important to the communities that they've been interacting with. They're also combining that now with proactive engagement events as well, looking at prevention, and I think it's by no means accountable to the figures that the DEP has already alluded to about the antisocial behaviour reduction. We were well resourced throughout the Operation Bang Halloween to Bonfire Night period through good planning, but I think the legwork beforehand that's been undertaken by effective use of commissioning budget plus effective neighbourhood policing combined has contributed towards those big figures that we're seeing, which are a bit of an outlier by comparison to other forces at the same time. I've mentioned about the crime recording already, CDI. I think also just to mention a point on the report about the effective use of the Operation Lockwood funding, Operation Lumley previously funding within the areas of the 37 hotspots of Gwent. In total, they've led to us having 7,110 additional hours within those highly affected areas, 68 arrests, 134 stop searches, 9 community resolutions and 11 weapons seized, which I think is positive use in relation to that funding. Looking at communities, making communities safer. I know it's already been discussed about the neighbourhood matters, which I think we're both receiving in many forums, that positive feedback from community members, and that is going to only continue. I will just add to the fact that even though we've only started this in October, out of the 30 plus forces that use this app, we are 4th highest already in relation to that activity. So a real drive on that BAU, but it really becoming a high priority for us because I see it as a huge engagement tool for us to maintain. I'm not going to repeat the aspects that are in the report that have already been discussed in relation to life from dangerous dogs. But I think there's one point that we didn't touch on dangerous dogs about that now force pan-wide, pan-Gwent perspective of working with our partners and our local authority and third sector agencies on emphasising the positivity of the LEAD programme, which is really good to see, and I know gives our communities reassurance that we're taking things proactively and positively to keep them safe. Again, I won't mention firearms licensing in detail, we've already touched on that. Looking at your priority for protecting the vulnerable, again, we've gone through a lot of the detail already in relation to some of the aspects of improvements that we've made in the areas of vulnerability, and also the DVDS backlog, which is totally transformed dramatically. I think just to re-emphasise the point that we are investing in training, making sure that our achieving best evidence opportunities are undertaken. And I think what I'd sort of add to the things that already the Deb sort of talked about is we're trying to ensure that issues are not seen in silos. So we've worked into a model now, an operating model, whereby we have neighbourhood response and crime, but we don't want people thinking just in silo. So the vulnerability aspect is something that we really drive in our neighbourhood officers and our response officers, not just within our detectives. Again, we talked about violence against women and girls and Soteria already. I will just add the report also touches on the fact that we are investing, I'll come to the priorities in a second, but in equality, diversity and inclusion to ensure that our police race action plan actions are effective moving forward. Putting victims first as your fourth strain. We've touched on the IQF already and the fact that we've invested the detective super in relation to that area, and you've asked for a bespoke input on that, which we will gratefully deliver. The one aspect I did want to just touch on is our investment in technology to improve in the victim experience. We know that we are not in a position yet where we want to be in relation to keep victims updated. For a variety of reasons I've discussed before, we need to change the way that our officers conduct themselves to make sure that they realise that victims are not just focused on hearing about a positive outcome, a person arrested, their property being recovered. They actually care about what we've done as well, and we've got to get better at doing that. Now, there is an aspect of understanding and training that's part of that, but there is also the investment that we're making with technology, with Citizen First and Salesforce Policing, which will give us some opportunities for those prompt updates for logs when officers conduct those inquiries to be effectively and very quickly passed to victims via their chosen means of update. That'll be text, email, telephone, and I think that's a really exciting opportunity for us, which we'll keep you informed on the progression of as that develops. And finally, you're reducing reoffending focus as well. We've already touched a bit on that focus that's needed in relation to offenders management, which we keep a keen eye on. I suppose the point I'll sort of end on in relation to the report there is that, you know, we've talked a lot about the achievements that have happened already in the last 12 months. What I specifically need our staff to focus on now, which I'm being really, really crystal clear on, are three principles. One, improving positive outcomes. We know that we're doing really well in relation to attendance and dealing with things effectively, recording crimes. What we've got to get better now is looking at the positive outcomes that you asked to explain on. I've set a firm target that I'd like us to get up to 15%, which sounds easier than it is, but requires a concerted effort from everybody to be able to undertake. Line management, training, looking at opportunities, and working with our response officers, neighbourhood officers, having that same focus on detections as our detectives have. So that's the one priority, and walking hand in hand with that is having better victim care to ensure that we're not having people chasing up their investigations. The second aspect of priority for the year is to build on what I see as greatly improved engagement. Our social media engagement, the way that our officers and staff and PCSOs are updating their own communities about positive activity within their own areas via digital, but also in-person techniques, has greatly improved, and I think there's even more opportunity for us in the future. I know I've talked to you about some exciting initiatives we've got about better use of what are traditional mobile police stations into being more engagement vehicles out in our communities, and building on the great work that's being undertaken on those engagement events, and also listening to that feedback from people like our newly formed Young Persons Independent Advisory Group on what things we can do to improve confidence and trust of different areas of harder to reach and seldom heard members of our community. And then the final thing, which I think is probably something that I just feel quite personally passionate about in the current environment, especially when you look at, you know, the atrocities that have gone on in the last weekend. The global to local impact can't be understated. And I need all of our staff to understand that equality, diversity and inclusion is the golden thread to operational performance. If our people think along the lines of inclusivity in everything they do, it's the long-term operational benefit to us all as an organisation, as well as the right thing to do, because ultimately, and I know I'm telling you something you know already, that leads to us being seen as a legitimate organisation, one that's trusted, one that's transparent, one that's approachable, and one that represents them. And when you have those honest held beliefs, you're much likely to have a community that's on board with you, that is less likely to commit crime and antisocial behaviour. And I need that EDI thread through everything we do, from our leadership teams, from our communication, from our training, from our operational orders and our everyday delivery. And it's not a nice to have, and it's not a bolt on. It's got to be threaded through everything we do, and everyone needs to consider that through everything they do. And I think that's a strong part of the delivery. And as part of that, you know, to an extent, you've got to, as a chief, put your money where your mouth is in relation to that resourcing. So we've appointed a chief inspector to look at benchmarking other forces, what they do well, what's done in other areas of public service, and what's done in outside agencies and companies and businesses, and listen to feedback as well from our communities on how we can do things better. And what I hope to be able to deliver to you in scrutiny meetings to come is a proposed model that we'll be able to invest in Went to have those long-term benefits that I articulate.
So thank you for that, Chief Constable, and it's just really positive for us to hear about the really firm foundations that have been put in place here. In terms of foundations, as you know, equality, diversity and inclusion, as you just mentioned, is one of the foundations of my Peace, Crime and Justice plan. And for me, in the words of a 9-year-old from Quinta Primary School, it is actually one of my non-negotiables in terms of all the work that we do. So it's really pleasing to hear your commitment to that. And actually what I'd really like to say, and again for the purposes of this public meeting, is that I'd like to commend you and your senior leadership team for the way you're taking forward this principle and threading it through the whole of the organisation in the face of some areas of policing overall are choosing to move away from this. So I commend you, Chief Constable, and your senior leadership team for doing the right thing and taking forward something that does really matter, and not being diverted from that by current trends and narratives that don't necessarily reflect what our citizens and our communities want to see. So thank you for that. That is very welcome, and I can't emphasise that strongly enough, how important that is in the current climate. And I recognise that doesn't come without challenge for you as a leadership team in terms of the position Gwent in relation to policing and law. So thank you for that. I just wanted to ask you, just in relation to the plan. So we know the financial considerations, and we've got a finance report coming up again in relation to this, but I've got a couple of questions. So we know that the funding, the local funding is has an impact, great feedback from communities. The UK government has decided to take this funding away from police forces now. So it's something that's had a great impact across communities, across the whole country. But in spite of being informed by that performance, inspired by it, government's decided to move away from that focused funding, and there is an expectation that this performance should come from business as usual. So I'd really like to ask you for an assurance around that in terms of the delivery around it. There's an expectation from government that this now becomes business as usual, but no additional funding. So they're taking away the £1 million grant that we received for that. If we look at our finances, we can see that if you take that out, there's still £500,000 overspent in terms of overtime. So how will you be able to, what assurances can you give around the ability to embed that as business as usual when we know that it's placing a demand on financial resources without that additional help from government?
It's incredibly difficult. I'll start by saying that I'm greatly reassured by the plans that of the ACC and Chief Secretary White as the neighbourhood lead have put in place to ensure that all of our neighbourhood posts are filled, and also the recruitment team as well, and making sure that we've got that fluid movement of PCSOs projected over the next 2 intakes as well, because I think neighbourhood policing is a huge answer to this. And obviously the funding, which I touched on, which you quite rightly said, has made a huge impact for us. The challenge is to absorb that to BAU, but I think that what I'm encouraged by is some of the evidence of what we've done already. So the thing that I've talked to you about before, about the commissioning and the visibility of neighbourhood officers and that direct impact on the Operation Bang period, needs to be business as usual. So the strong drive on visible policing of those neighbourhood teams, but also our response officers realising that when they go to calls, again, it goes back to a little bit to not working your side. When they go to calls, they're not just there to record a crime and deal with things really effectively at the time. They're to think like a neighbourhood officer too. So think like a problem-solving person about how can they take one of the items of the problem away to save those issues. So I think there's that. There's also the aspect where we've got to get better at, or got to carry on improving the positive engagement events that we do, and do that with partners as well. And we've also got to be alive, and we've been pretty good at this before, looking for funding opportunities for grants when they arise, because they often arise without much notice. And we are quite proactive as a force of looking at having almost like a problem profile ready to launch into that requirement as and when it's happened. And we've done that with the Safer Streets programme previously on a number of occasions, and I think we've just got to look at what those opportunities are there as well, really. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that.
No, we have this conversation through our engagement board in terms of how we can make sure that we sustain performance that we put in place. I think the reality is it will look different because we are able to use the funding in a way which really takes dedicated time in lots of areas. So it will look different, but we do need to balance that against the investment we're having in the neighbourhood world. So we've been able to uplift posts, and in year 2 I can uplift posts by an additional 18. So that of course will support the entire ethos. So I'm really comfortable that we'll be able to sustain the performance, but I think it will look different. So we might just need to be really clear in terms of the public why that looks different, but we are looking to overall sustain what we're delivering for them.
Okay, thank you for that. And I've just got an additional question. And so one of the points you touched on when you were talking about this, what you were actually talking about in terms of contact with the public, particularly victims, is what you were actually talking about is customer service.
Yes.
Right, and we may not describe it in that way, given the nature of the services that are provided, but all of us, in every aspect of our lives, understand and recognise what good customer service is when we have an interaction with an organisation. And it's clear that what you're seeking to achieve is improvements in that overall experience for those citizens who are having an interaction with the services that are provided there. So I know that there's been significant investment in terms of the tools that will enable you to have that contact to provide those updates. And I do agree, completely agree that it's not, people don't always want that positive outcome. Of course, they'd like a positive outcome, but what they want to know is what's happening. And it's that gap very often that leads to frustration with policing, isn't it? And therefore impacts on trust and confidence. So I think that relationship there is clear. I just wanted to really seek assurance from you and the team, Chief Constable, that in terms of the tools that are available to you, for the significant majority of people who are providing the service to, that update, that real-time quick update will be using a communication tool will be exactly what people want.
Yes.
But for those vulnerable victims, I'm just seeking an assurance that is not the approach that will be taken.
No, I think I'll let Vicky expand on this, but I think how you described it already, the service will be tailored to the victim. So some of that will be chosen by the victim, but some of that will be articulated by the officer who's dealing with the case.
Yeah, so some of it will be set by us from the very outset, so we will agree as a course which crime types and offence stats classification will even receive the opportunity for the updates to be provided in this way, because for some people who are especially vulnerable because of the offence for which they are a victim, it will not be appropriate for this to be the right tool. Then if somebody is in by nature of the offence, people can choose to opt out of receiving updates this way. And what we talk about in some of the silver meetings, which are recently set up, is that this is an enhancement to talking to your victims, not a tool that replaces that relationship. And that is the language that we will continue to use. So this is not everything else stops and we've now got this tool. This is to enhance that service delivery we give to the public, because we recognise that there is a gap in what we've been delivering so far.
Thank you for that. Thank you. That's really helpful. Any further questions on the Chief Constable's?
Just a quick question. Obviously, you've mentioned quite a few things in relation to the op model and some of the resourcing challenges across all the different pillars and things like that. Are you sort of confident that you've got the right levels in each of the pillars, and also absolutely minimising those officers that are in back office functions that could be potentially deployed?
Yeah, go on.
Sorry, only because I've written a paper this week.
Oh, fair enough.
I feel like you've sent me a
Yeah, I didn't for the camera.
I'll do it in 3 ways. So new operating model as a whole, we're coming up to the 1 year go live date. So we will run a post implementation review, which will be managed by Karen and the team with this change. That is part 1. Part 2. We have definitely recognised that demand over the last year has changed, and there are 2 key component parts of that. One is the neighbourhood policing guarantee, and the second one is the rape investigation team, which the DEP touched upon earlier. As a result of the changes in demand, we recognise that we need to change our structure in order to best support the provision for that. So last week I've written a paper to say why I think the structure should change in order to meet the demand. Some of those changes are supported by process evolution simulation modelling, which has been undertaken by the response team, and that will come up to the DEP Service Improvement Board for you to consider for agreement or otherwise. So absolutely, definitely, and my view on it is that policing and our needs of our communities are changing all the time, so we shouldn't be afraid to change our structure if that is what is needed of the community. I see that as quite a positive thing. At the minute, I am really content that we can do that within our overall numbers based on the priorities that the Chief has set out within his delivery plans and meeting the needs of the PCC's priorities. And obviously, if anything were to change, I've got the opportunity to go through governance to the DEP and to the Chief in order to identify those risks, but I'm not about that.
I think you've probably seen some from your question maybe by comparison to other forces. When you look at the handily, the document that's come out has almost split it into our pillars of our model, and where we address the response and neighbourhood and crime in detectives. And I think what's interesting is that there's definitely a bit of a perception journey that we're going to have to take our staff on, because we are quite high by comparison to other forces on the numbers that we have in response, and low by comparison to the number of forces on what we have in detectives, and almost bang in the middle in relation to maybe assets, albeit I will add to the last point, I think we use them more effectively, but that's a separate thing. With regard to those first aspects, some of the points that the ACC referred to earlier on about the reinvestment in the Great Investigation team is going to address some of that balance. But what I'm really acutely aware of is there's a bit of a perception aspect that we've got to undertake in our own organisation as well, because we do hear about some of our response officers being short on numbers, and that's not correct, because we got more adequate numbers than certainly in the time that I've seen. Within 100%. So I think that the movements that the ACC articulated already are going to redress some of the outliers. There will still be a slight nuance difference, mind, because we're probably the only force in the country that includes roads policing and specialist ops in its neighbourhood pillar as opposed to its response pillar. So that makes us look more of an outlier in response than we actually are. Because we use our VSO teams in a problem-solving upstream way, working alongside the neighbourhood teams to problem solve. So, but I think getting back to your point, we'll have that. We will look quite well distributed across our resource bank. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Comprehensive update there. Should we move on then to 3D, the finance monitoring report? Matt?
Thank you. Sorry, Matt. Before you do you mind if I step out for a minute?
Thank you, Commissioner. So the report you have in front of you is the 2023 financial performance report, which basically summarises the revenue position, balance sheet, working capital, capital spend, reserves position, medium-term outlook at the end of 31st December 2025. The overall position remains positive. So it follows on from the Q2 report. So at the end of Q3, the key highlight is the end of Q3, we're reporting a £5.3 million underspend, which forecasts to the end of the year £5.6 million underspend. And that comes about from three key areas. The first is a saving on interest costs that we've been able to avoid by using reserves rather than borrowing to fund the capital programme. So we've saved £1 million or £42 million there. There's a reprofiling within the capital programme to reduce the amount that's been going through that, which is a further 2.2 million. And then we've also received additional funding and grant income of 2.2 million relating to pay awards and Operation Lockwood, as this is highlighted. I would say that those last two, that additional grant funding, is largely cost neutral because the expenditure needs to go alongside that. And I would also flag that at the start of the year, the budget assumed that we would need to release £2.7 million of reserves to balance it. We won't need to do that now. So essentially, the underspend on a cash basis is reduced by about 2.7 million. And so it's linked specifically to the reprofiling of the capital programme and the interest costs that we managed to avoid. The individual adjustments in terms of pay and overtime, etc., are highlighted, and the non-pay elements are highlighted in the report. I'll just pick out a few key ones. You've already mentioned overtime, for example, in terms of that being a £1.5 million overspend at the end of December. As you rightly pointed out, that does include mutual aid, Operation Lockwood in terms of the hotspot funding, etc. And once you take out those impacts where we've got the income in a different place, if you like, on a net basis, that overspend is substantially reduced down to around about £780,000. and that will be roughly where it is in terms of the year-end position as well. It's fair to say that governance around overtime has been strengthened and continues to be strengthened through the last 12 months. There's monthly reporting that goes through the various pillar SMTs, and also then is, has oversight within the productivity and efficiency board as well. And I know the ACC is all over it from that perspective with the pillar leads. In terms of the non-paid budgets, they're all broadly favourable. Premises is substantially lower, but that is a function of the reduced capital programme coming through, but also from reduced costs in relation to utilities. So we've been able to implement a number of systems within the estates team that have meant that we've been more efficient in terms of the utilities that we're purchasing from that point of view. Supplies and services, transport, they're all broadly on track from that aspect. Looking at the balance sheet, we've got £25 million of cash. Debtors are substantially down, which is good because we're getting our money in from our debtors. They're also largely public sector, so there's no risk there. The creditors, we have really good payment bit in terms of paying our contractors, and a large number of them are local within Gwent. So that's down at 18 days against the target of 30 days, so that's really positive. The capital programme continues. We've spent 9.7 million of it. There's 8.8 left in the budget to spend. And the governance is via the Capital Strategy Board Chairman, DCC. Reserves position is as per the 24-25 audited accounts. That position will change as we head into the next quarter. And I'll be working with the OPCC and Darren as CFO in terms of what your reserves position looks like going forward. That 18.2 million is currently split 5.5 million in terms of the general fund and 12.6 million, 12.7 million on earmark, on reserves that have been earmarked for specific projects. In terms of looking forward, as we head into 26-27, we've got the Neighbourhood Policing Guarantee delivery in terms of phase 2. And we've already mentioned that the sentencing review is a potential risk for us from that one. That hasn't been budgeted for, but we will keep tabs on it, and I'll tie in with the ACC to make sure that we've got key performance measures to be able to track any potential impacts and the financial aspect of it. Similarly, there will also be broader work needed in terms of police reform agenda and what that looks like. But most recently, obviously, the impacts, short, medium and long-term impacts of the global events that have happened over the last week. It's too early to tell what those impacts will be, but there's a lot of chatter, as you've seen within the media, in terms of what that might mean for prices. The issue that we also have is what that means for our communities in terms of our response to local events and what that might cost us in terms of not just the money, but also in terms of people being able to do that. So, in short, we will continue to manage the finances robustly so that we don't spend more than we need to. But we will also maintain an element of flexibility so that we can anticipate change and respond to those changing circumstances. Continue to invest in technology, that the Chief has already mentioned from that perspective, but also in terms of investing in our people to make sure that we do deliver that. Happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you very much for that. I'm really glad to receive this report throughout the appropriate formal governance processes that we have in place, and I'll be delighted to share this information with my police and crime members because I know they're very interested in this. So, just pausing there just to think about this. I've only got a couple of questions because actually we've talked a lot about that hotspot funding and the impact of that. So I know it's relevant to this particular item, but we've discussed that further. I did want to just highlight that when we've looked throughout the year at our financial information, so the point that's been made at quarter two is when we look at the in-year variance, and my police and crime panel are really interested in the in-year variance, some of that may also be down to the levels of accuracy of profiling. So my question really is what steps are being undertaken to ensure that work is taking with budget holders to resolve this, to increase the accuracy of the profiling. It's like you say, Matt, we've got uncertainties. The global crisis has just happened. We don't know the impact of that, but there will be other aspects of the work where accuracy could be improved. So just what steps are being undertaken with budget holders to do that? Because I recognise the information is that you receive comes from the budget holders.
It does. It comes from the finance business planners who work with budget holders. There are two schools of thought when it comes to the budgeting, Commissioner. One is that you set your budget and you don't change it through the year. And the second school of thought is that you flex your budget through the year to reflect changes and known changes in demand. I prefer the former because it enables better variance analysis and transparency. We didn't get it right in terms of the 25-26 profiling. I think that was largely due to some inexperience within the team. Training has already been provided, and as I know we've spoken about it previously in terms of the quarter 2 report, but also from a quarter 1 perspective. So the individual who did the profiling on certain elements of this has been has received additional training from that point of view, but I've also strengthened the management review aspects within the finance team, and I'll be doing an additional review in more detail myself this year with senior accountants within the finance team to make sure that the profiling does it right. I think our budget holders are very good from that perspective. There are always going to be changes. We can never necessarily know when we might receive national invoices for things. So we will always get some variance in terms of timing differences, but can learn better from what has gone before, and we will. And those performance aspects and those training aspects have already happened.
Thank you very much for that. I'd like to move on to the forecast underspend. Chief Constable and I have many conversations about the underspend, the conversations of actually my suggestions to the Chief Constable on how it may be invested going forward. So just kind of expanding the discussion, really, Chief Constable, what proposals do you have, if any, in relation to invest in that non-recurring underspend?
Yeah, I think there are conversations, obviously, that we've had, Commissioner. There are some, and subsequently I've also had with Matt, there are some long-running opportunities that our staff have highlighted would be of assistance for their own well-being. Some developments in their courses, for example, for lighting systems that we know we've done in part, but we could do in whole. And I'm aware that they are some of those aspects have got some sizable investments to rectify. However, the long-term aspects of benefits for them are going to be huge for us. And when you think about, our strong aspiration of people being well and in work and feeling valued, the employer voice is a huge one for us. So that's just an example of something. But it sounds like a lighting system is a quick fix. It's a quite extensive fix to undertake. But I think, in spite of it being an outlay up front, it'll be a sound investment as one example, really.
It's really good to hear that. I think, especially as we've talked about well-being throughout this meeting, and it is good to hear that people are being considered in that way, and their environments being considered in that way. So I look forward to those proposals coming forward. Anyone else got any further questions? Darren?
Just a little addendum to the profiling piece. I think it's important, and I know Matt and I discussed how we break down that variance script. I think there's 4 component parts. We talked about the budget profiles not equating to spend. That's one bit. The second bit is the slippage and deferment spend. So that spend is always needed. That budget is always needed. There's a deferment of slippage in year So there's a non-recurrent impact. I think that's an important narrative. I think there's a bit about how we show reserve transfers coming in. I think that also. And then what you end up then, which will be a very, very small minimal amount, will be the true underlying recurrent operational surplus. So the loss of that will be a tiny amount. So I think we've got to get that clarity around, sometimes the variance looks large, but it's non-recurrent, it's under reserve transfers, and the underlying recurrent bit will be minuscule, I believe.
So, yeah, absolutely. To come back on that, I've already had conversations with the head of finance in terms of how we look at the layout of the reporting, because I want to be able to get that clear understanding in terms of what the operational impact is, what the capital program impact is, what the reserve impact is, and what the funding and income looks like, so that we can see that underlying operational surplus or deficit from a healthy surplus. But we can see that, and then we can also have a very clear understanding in terms of what is a funding impact as opposed to an operational delivery.
Yeah.
So we will be redoing that. I won't do it for Q4. I will do it for Q1, Q2 for the next financial year.
Okay. Thank you, that's really helpful. Thank you. Any further questions on this item? Okay, well, this is the point where we pause the meeting then to formally ask for the exclusion of the press and the public, if they will. Because we will be moving on to the next part of the meeting, which is not part of the public meeting. So just pause for a moment. Yeah. And if anybody would like to just take a moment here, a couple of minutes for a comfort break or get a drink, please do so at the